I've been fascinated by the idea that bitachon can and must be operationalized. Now, what we mean by operationalized, mentioned last time, is that each person needs to be able to concretely say, what would I look like if I was a little bit more connected to bitachon? I don't know if it's universal. I'm still very much back and forth on that, but or maybe there are parts that are universal and parts that are unique to each person. But it means that to just hear a thought of bitachon, while it's great, in the Hasidic world, there's the expression "Hamanti ki adaber." There's emuna is enhanced by talking about it. But I think that people underestimate just how much of a difference bitachon would make in their lives. They tend to assume that it's my life and I could enhance my life. It can make it even better. Somebody said to me, "Oh, so bitachon is all about whether I can feel confident that if I ask for something, I'll get it, or I'll get what's good for me." Sort of a machlokes between the Chazon Ish and Rabbi Yisrael Salanter, and they thought that they had somehow captured anything about bitachon by discussing that dispute. That dispute's not going to give you anything about bitachon. It'll give you a piece of hashkafic information, but it's not going to address the fundamental question of how does a person relate to life and to Hashem with more bitachon. That then they might get into the question of at what point would I feel confident that my request would be addressed, and at what point will I only feel confident that my best interests will be taken into account. So I started to compile a list of what it would look like if I was more of a Baal Bitachon. For me, it's quite easy to do this because there's a story that's told that there was a certain Jew, a Talmud Chacham, who also worked for a living. I think it was in Eretz Yisrael, who each week would write a piece in the local Jewish Haredi press analyzing some issue that was on the Jewish agenda. And it turns out that the Brisker Rav got wind of this piece, and he was amazed at how this person hit the nail on the head every time. Hit the nail on the head, understood the issue, and he was so amazed that he kept on saying, "How does he do it? How does he do it?" So one of the people who was close to the Brisker Rav met this person, and he expressed the Brisker Rav's amazement, and he asked it as a question: "How do you do it?" And this fellow was clever enough to understand exactly what the Brisker Rav meant. The Brisker Rav meant, "How do you do it?" He's not learning full time; he's also working. And there's an expression in Chazal that das balabatim is the opposite of das chachamim. So he said, "Tell the Brisker Rav, I'll tell him how I do it. There's an issue that seems pressing on the Jewish agenda, and I sit down and I think about what my reaction to that issue is. And then I just write down the opposite and tell the Brisker Rav that that's what I do." And the fellow went past, didn't realize that he was carrying such a treasure. And the Brisker Rav was overwhelmed with joy. First of all, because he loved a good zing. And this, of course, was the zing. And he was so pleased that this person understood exactly why he was surprised and responded in kind. So for me, this is very easy. I just sit down and I think about myself, and whatever is the opposite of what I feel, I just write down that must be bitachon. So it's very easy. I can do this. I can do this easily. So let's look at, if you don't mind, I'd like to take a look at the list that is emerging for me, and maybe you can yourselves assess what part of this would be um, relevant to you, and what part of this, meaning it's universal, and what part of it might be just uniquely my hang up, and in which case I would encourage you to think about what your bitachon operational description would look like. What would I put yourself in that I? What would I look like if I had an upgrade in bitachon? So I divided it into three categories: feeling, appearing, and sounding. Okay, so the first items on the feel list are joy. Now, we talked about that last time, that joy is virtually a synonym of emunah and bitachon. We went into it last week. Won't go into it again now because it would take a little bit more time than we have. But we need to know that if a person feels bitachon and he's not feeling joy, he needs to go back to the drawing board. It doesn't mean that he hasn't done work in the direction of bitachon, but if it's not starting to emerge as joy, then he has to suspect that it might be just self-soothing, or it might be a have to, a must that is on his list. He must have bitachon because it's not giving him a sense of joy. So I would put that on the pretty much universal list. I think what we saw in the Maral, I think it has to be viewed as a universal, and it's probably the most telling barometer or measure of bitachon. More bitachon, more joy. And now what comes next might be a little bit more individual, but that has to be viewed as, wow, that means that this Western, almost dysthymic permission, it's always okay to be a little bit unhappy, is not compatible with bitachon. The next is I would feel less inclined to save, solve, and fix, and more inclined to share, care, and encourage. The next I found very compelling, and that is that I would know how to have tears. I would know how to be sad without being frustrated. And again, there's a sense that frustration means that the situation shouldn't be this way, which is in basically a cousin to anger. The situation should not be this way is a frustration. But that doesn't mean that a person is not able to be sad. There are things that in the context of the relationship with Hashem that we're supposed to be sad about. Hashem seeks life, and therefore death should cause us sadness, etc. The same, and the flip side of that is jubilation. When a person feels happiness, it would be filled with gratitude and not with a sense of victory. Again, victory being I did it, frustration being it shouldn't be that way. Sadness and joy can both be experienced without frustration, without a sense of victory. The next item is a sense of fearlessness. The Chovos HaLevavos mentions this explicitly, and he says that there was a Baal Bitachon who was found to he got lost in the forest. He had slept there, and they found him sleeping there, and he said, "Aren't you afraid of the wild beasts. And he said, I'm embarrassed in front of my creator to be afraid of something else. That is a very deep definition of bitachon, where there's only one thing to be afraid of, and that is, am I living with fidelity to the relationship, the encompassing relationship with Hashem? And if I'm living in line with that relationship, then there's nothing to worry about. And even if I'm not living in line with that relationship, as we know that the Chovos HaLevavos says that bitachon is a confidence in the relationship, even when I am not living up to the call of the relationship. But certainly there shouldn't be fear associated with anything else. And I think the sense that there is no urgency, because there's only one thing to be urgent about, and that's bitachon. And nothing else should bring about urgency, because everything else is being presented through the filter and through the lens of bitachon. The other is an absence of manipulation. Now, that could be in conversations. There's a certain transparency that is associated with bitachon, where I'm not trying to or angling for a certain outcome, not to a conversation and not to a situation, not trying to manipulate the reality. Now, that doesn't mean that I am not doing things that are appropriate in the context of the situation to bring about a certain outcome, because that's what Hashem wants. But manipulation has a sense that it's hidden, that I'm trying to mask the hidden agenda. A person with an increase of bitachon doesn't need to hide the agenda. He can make the agenda quite explicit. You say, yeah, well, sometimes though, there needs to be an element where if the other person knew, they might not move in the right direction. This gets a little bit edgy. This is a little bit individual as to how much a person can afford to be in a role where he's doing something to bring about or to cause an outcome, particularly if that outcome is beneficial to him. If that outcome is beneficial to the other person, I don't think that we can call that manipulation. That isn't a negative. That doesn't have a negative connotation. I'm doing this so that the other person will grow, so that the other person will understand, so that the other person will see themselves better in the mirror. If it's being done for the benefit of the other person, I wouldn't call it manipulation. And manipulation generally has the context that I can't achieve what I need to achieve for myself if I don't angle to get that outcome. And that's a little sinister. And it certainly reflects the sense that I can't rely on a Kodesh Baruch Hu in my life. So I need to angle and manipulate. So the absence of manipulation was something to think about. Relaxation, I think, is clear. Absence of hysteria, I think, is again clear. And the other, which is again perhaps personal, is there's an intimacy with Hashem that is associated with a bitachon, where the person will not feel lonely. He's not lonely because he's not abandoned. He's not alone. He is intimate with, he is close with Hashem, and that feeling is closely associated with joy. But I wanted to pinpoint it because loneliness is something that saps the lifeblood from a person even before he can get to joy. So that's why I put those into the feeling group. Just to run through the appearance, I think the appearance and how it sounds, I think, are a little bit easier. A certain amount of calm, that person exudes a certain amount of calm. If a person walks into a room, you walk in with a certain energy. and that energy will cause others in the room to respond a certain way. That energy is what a person brings with him. It's like the wake. It's like the wake of the boat. What you walk into the room with, you can sense it. If you're a sensitive person, you can certainly pick it up. And when a person is increasing their level of bitachon, then what they bring into the room is a certain energy of calm that others will be able to sense. It's easy for the person to smile. They're available. Now, availability is very significant in the world of bitachon because a lack of availability means that this moment somehow shouldn't be. Availability means that I recognize that if Hashem is bringing me to this moment, this must be the moment. There can't be a situation where I've been presented with a moment, but I shouldn't be in the moment. But you are in the moment. And so if you need to take steps to get out of this moment, those two or those steps are part of this moment. So availability is a sense, and it is very apparent to others when somebody is available, as opposed to when somebody is always worried about some other agenda. Of course, again, without interrupting, paraphrasing, they would not feel a sense of a need to interrupt a moment because this is the moment. And that was an orderly. I knew that this was going to be part of Bitachon because I'm such a mess. So that everything has a time and a place. If Hashem brought it into my life, then it has a time and a place. Bitachon always is also going to appear as a certain sense of independence. It's not being drawn by expectations, because the only expectations that I concern myself with are those that Hashem has indicated. And so those become my urgency, and otherwise I am independent. There's a curiosity, fully engaged with the present, I think is an outgrowth of the availability. And here about the clock, the notion or the idea that I am running out of time is something that reflects, but maybe I'm meant to run out of time. Maybe this is all the time that there is. Who said that something else is more important if Hashem has placed this on my plate? And if you say, well, then maybe this shouldn't be on my plate, fine. So make that assessment. A person with bitachon is making that assessment and determining what is and what is not on my plate. And I think that what it sounds like will take even less time, and not promising outcomes. Qualify it with Be'ezras Hashem, however a person feels comfortable expressing that outcomes are not mine to promise. I will try, b'li neder, I will try to do this. I intend to do it. I hope to do it. But there should be some sense in a person's speech that feels a little bit less than this is the outcome I can deliver. And I know that deliverables have become a very big item in the modern world, and contracts are built around deliverables, and all of those have a little bit of a poison arrow, a little bit in them, where it's a deliverable, and of course there's a contingency of that deliverability. If it's deliverable, then you get paid for it. But there needs to be in there the sense, I might not get paid because I didn't deliver it. That's understood. But there should be a little bit of a sense that this deliverable requires Hashem's assistance, and therefore attributing outcomes to Hashem. I think those of you who know me for a while know that I think that the most core expression of a human being is, I'm fine, Siyata Dishmaya, how are you? I'm fine, how are you? Says that the bitachon is there in place such that I feel taken care of, and that frees up energy to be able to concern myself with the welfare of another person. So I'm fine, how are you is perhaps a core expression of bitachon. I don't know. Lemad l'shon cholomar eini yodea. To accustom oneself to being able to say I don't know is something that is an expression of the fact that I'm not the final address of anything, and I want to be a conduit. I want to be part of the solution, but I recognize that I am, in the end of the day, nothing more than a conduit, and not the one who has the information. And it creates a certain tentative stance towards life and towards the world. I think that it's important to know that there is a place for a person to sound absolutely uncompromising and clear when 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 the person is reflecting Hashem's will in the world. I don't think that it should be abused. I think that it needs to be tempered, but it needs to be part of the person's repertoire. Otherwise, you have to wonder whether this is a manipulation or this is bitachon. Bitachon means sometimes being able to say something that is unpopular, and that is something that is for a person to be able to be firm and uncompromising, and even if that means that it sometimes means taking a stand that is, as I said, unpopular. Non-judgmental, I think I misspelled that. Uncritical, where the only issue is a personal preference. Again, it's a manipulation if it's for my benefit. And if it's just for the other, why would I be critical? I shouldn't be critical. I should be helping that person grow. The idea of being critical is sort of like being frustrated, which is that shouldn't be this way. The person shouldn't be this way. The situation shouldn't be this way. But the situation is this way. And being able to embrace the reality so that I can respond to it appropriately is an inherent component of bitachon, a lack of prejudice. I think that addressing Hashem with conventional conversational tefillah is so central to why this is not just about being a good guy. This is about being able to be in a relationship with Hashem where, the way the Chofetz Chaim used to put it, I'm talking to Hashem all the time. When I want to speak to Hashem, I open my siddur, my Tehillim. When I want to listen to Hashem, I learn. So he's in a constant conversation with Hashem, and tefillah, the way the Mesilas Yesharim describes it, should be first and foremost a conversation. Kidaber ish el re'ehu, that I'm speaking and my friend is listening. Only then, he says, only once a person has that in his heart can he start to recognize that there's a disparity, that Hashem is far greater than I. But the basis of the interaction has to be conversational. And you kind of wonder when you see people doing the shuckle and doing certain things in davening, I'm not sure that that's the way they would talk to somebody in a conversational way. The other is what fills the silence. What the sound of silence, to borrow the expression, has to be a transcendent sound, which means that the room gets filled. When the person's silenced, the room gets filled with Hashem's presence. And finally, I wrote down graciousness. We weren't sure whether to put that into sounds like, feels like, looks like, but you would readily understand that without graciousness, sort of wonder if the person really is at ease in their relationship with Hashem, in the I'm fine, how are you? A graciousness makes room. It makes room because Hashem is making room. I can make room because Hashem is making room. So this is my little rundown here of again, it's very much a draft. It's very much just where we're gonna start the process, but I thought that it would be useful for you to have at least one draft so that you could take it and sort of go with it. Say, I would modify on this for my own change, that which I would do to increase if I was more of a bitachon, I would put a focus somewhere else. You'd make some changes to this list, which is great because that means that you're starting to personalize the process, and the more we personalize the process, the better. And